Good morning. I'm Margaret Haynes, the Mayor Pro Tem, and obviously the Mayor is not here this morning. He is out of town on city business, and I will call to order the agenda briefing for the first meeting in June. And at this point, well, let's see. We have a couple of presentations for tomorrow night, and oh yeah, thank you. Everybody just holler when I forget something. The first thing we need to do is a roll call. Okay, so Councilmember Rivenbark, he is also out on business at the Lower Cape Fear Water Authority. Mr. Anderson.
Present.
Mr. Barnett. Mr. Spears.
Present.
Mr. Waddell. And the Mayor Pro Tem is here also. Okay.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, you may want to check and see if the mayor is online. He was going to try to join us virtually.
Oh, okay, great. Good to know. Mayor Saffo, are you with us?
I am with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good, very good.
Okay, thank you.
So the first order of business is our consent agenda, approval of the minutes of May 16th and the regular meeting of the 17th. C2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a multi-year janitorial services contract with Top to Bottom House Cleaning, LLC of Wilmington, North Carolina, in the amount of $83,460 per year, and a multi-year janitorial services contract with Self-Rising Cleaning Service Corporation of Wilmington, North Carolina, in the amount of $193,388 per year. C3 is a resolution approving the amended financial management policies of the City of Wilmington. Then, of course, we have public information. Our public hearings are PH1, an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair or demolish the dwelling at 910 Campbell Street as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. This was continued from April 19th. PH2 is an ordinance of the City Council to extend the corporate limits of the City of Wilmington, North Carolina. PH3 is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to initially zone property containing 4.82 acres of land located at 205, 209, 213, and 217 Middle Sound Loop Road to MD17, which is high density multiple dwelling residential district, conditional district, for 72-unit multi-dwelling affordable senior housing development. PH4 is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 1.89 acres of land located at 1441 Eastwood Road from community business to regional business conditional district to allow for an indoor recreational facility as a permitted use. PH5 is an ordinance amending the Land Development Code, Chapter 18, for various amendments and cleanup items related to permitted uses, landscaping, frontage standards, dimensional and design standards, measurements and definitions, and administrative provisions. PH6 is a public hearing on the draft 5-year Consolidated Plan CDBG. Okay, on to ordinances. 01 is an ordinance for supplemental appropriation to proceeds in the amount of $162,688 from the sale of Optimus Park for permanent supportive housing. 02 is an ordinance making an appropriation of $234,735 for the Riverwalk Visitor Information Center renovation project. 03 is an ordinance appropriating $50,000 for a Riverwalk Tidal Marsh Extension Feasibility Study funded by a $10,000 property owner contribution and $40,000 from the council's contingency.
Mayor Pro Tem,
there was reference to a conceptual rendering being attached, and there was no conceptual rendering in the attached. So could we get that?
We'll make sure it gets put on the electronic and also send it out,
Thank you.
hard copy.
04A is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation in the amount of $573,440 to the Transportation Bond Racine Drive intersection improvements, $503,440,000 from the Transportation Bonds Contingency Bike Ped Project Funds, and $70,000 from the Pedestrian Bike Improvements. 04B is a resolution authorizing the award of a construction contract in the amount of $625,376.09 to Morgan Trucking and General Construction, Inc. for the Transportation Bond Racine Drive intersection improvements. 05A is an ordinance making appropriations to the general fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2022. And that, of course, is continued from May 17th. And this is a first reading only. 05B is an ordinance making appropriations to the grant projects, financial plans, enterprise funds, debt service fund, and special tax district for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2022, continued again from May 17th. 05C is an ordinance making appropriations to the capital projects funds for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2022, continued again from May 17th. 06 is an ordinance amending various chapters of the City of Wilmington fee schedule for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2022, again continued from May 17th.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
We have a number of items to update you on with regard to the budget that came out of your workshop held a little over a week ago. We'd like to hold those items as long as we could so that Councilman Rivenbark could be here. So if we could go on and continue with the agenda, and then we'll do the after items agenda and come back to those budget items if you don't mind.
That's fine. Resolutions, we have R1 is a resolution removing the Wilmington Urban Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Executive Director, also known as the Transportation Planning Manager position, from the City of Wilmington's wage and salary scales, i.e. the position classification system, effective with the passage of the resolution. And that concludes the agenda, and I will refer to our city manager, Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a number of follow-up items. Some are from your your budget workshop that was held about 10 days ago. We've also emailed to you over the weekend a couple of items that have come up with regard to funding associated potentially with the budget. But we'd like to hold those items off as long as we could in hopes that Councilman Rivenbark will be able to join us. If you don't mind, we'd like to take a point of pleasure and go ahead and do the post-agenda review presentation on the availability of developable land in the city, if you don't mind.
I think that sounds great. Let's do it.
Ms. Moretti?
Good morning. Give us just a moment. You all received an email with the presentation that I'm about to give, and we're going to get that set up. And once I go through the slide presentation, then Jeff Thomas will come up and go through the interactive maps to show you what we're referring to in the presentation. Just thought it would be easier to go through the information, and then he can walk through the maps and give you and show you a visual of what we're talking about. If you just give us one moment, please.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. We are here this morning to provide some information on the potential tax growth still remaining within the city boundaries. Sometimes we hear that there is no more vacant property to develop, and with the change of the annexation laws many years ago, the potential tax growth is limited. Back in November, after our budget work session, the mayor asked if we know what real estate is available to be developed within the city when we talk about our tax growth. So I pulled together the smart people that could help me with putting something together to show what the real estate is still available. Working with Jeff Thomas and Richard Tunstra from GIS, Ron Satterfield in Planning, and Laura in Budget, the team came up with a story map concept to give a visual of what real estate appears to be available for development. 3 story maps were created using data from the city, the county, and the state. Within these maps, the state sources are linked. These maps are interactive that will allow for you to move through them, viewing different data on the parcels highlighted. Once I go through these slides talking about the map information, Jeff Thomas will come up and walk through the different maps that he built that give the visualization of potential development. The first map Jeff will show you is just a very simple map highlighting all of the vacant, undeveloped properties within the city. We also are showing the parcels that are owned by the city, as these may be parks or other city-owned properties. We were surprised to see that there are over 3,000 vacant properties showing within the city. Combined, these properties cover over 4,000 acres throughout the city. The second map shows the properties that are determined to be developable, meaning that they are vacant and buildable. The areas you will see outlined are contiguous that may span across multiple properties that could have different owners. So there could be 3 1-acre lots side by side. We just highlighted all 3 of them, so they could be owned by different owners, but the potential for development across those 3 properties are what we were looking at. We are using the area that is not identified as wetlands or have flood hazards when we talk about what the buildable areas are. We recognize that these areas can be remediated and become better suited for building, and therefore we want to be very clear for anyone viewing that the city makes no claim to ultimate suitability for development. The maps we are showing are based on the data sources we listed in the previous slide. Of course, we cannot determine what the potential tax revenue could be on these properties if developed, as it will depend on how the property use is developed. We are showing here how the map is defined, as different coloring of parcels will indicate what the land value per acre is. This information is what the land tax assessed value shows from the county sources. The last item showing 0 is not calculated, relates mostly to condominiums where tax records do not separate building value from land value. And Jeff will talk more about this when he walks through the maps. The final map will show parcels that indicate potential value in redevelopment. These parcels are developed but are potentially underutilized based on specific criteria. The coloring on the map is based on how many of these criteria the parcel meets. The darker the color means the parcel falls under all three of these criteria, and the lighter coloring means that the parcel only meets one of these criteria. There will be several car lots that show up on the map as they most likely meet all three of the criteria, but without going through each one of the individual properties, having the criteria was a way to look at what has more potential of being redeveloped. As we know, any parcel can be redeveloped, but the parcels highlighted on the map stand out more as potential. So the basis for these criteria in determining what's potentially underutilized is the land value is greater than the building value, building coverage of the parcel is less than 10%, and parking lot coverage of the parcel is greater than 50%. Also included in the map is a link that you can click on, and it will add push pins to the parcels that are currently in development and give you more information about those. So again, we can only show what the current tax assessed value is on these parcels, as the potential tax growth would be dependent on how the properties are redeveloped. The criteria count, as I mentioned on the previous slide, represents how many of the criteria the parcel meets. What is shown is that 12 parcels meet all three of the criteria used to determine if the parcel is currently developed, underutilizing its potential. And again, Jeff will walk through these and give you some demonstrations. So the objective of the presentation today is just to give you a visual of what potential tax growth is still available within the city. These maps can be viewable by the public if that's something council wants us to share. And any feedback you have on the information provided, we can make adjustments for or provide additional information if you'd like. So from here, I'll ask Jeff to come up and walk through the maps to give you a visual of what we're talking about. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, welcome.
All right, so this is a story map that shows a few different maps, starting off with a very simple one that just shows the vacant properties throughout the city. Each of these maps is live, completely, you can zoom in and pan around just like other web maps you may be familiar with. But you'll see the green parcels are the ones that are vacant according to our records, which are always subject to be updated. And the ones that, here there's a legend, and the ones that have a red hash on them are owned by the city, just for reference. That doesn't mean that they may or may not be vacant, but it's just for reference. Like this is a park right here that is not vacant. So keep scrolling down to the next one, which kind of changes into a different map that is a little more complicated because it's showing these green hash areas, which is basically the parcels that we were just looking at that are available, but removes the areas that are perhaps less developable due to wetlands or flood hazards. Again, these can be remediated, which is why we don't want to make any assessment of whether or not it can be developed, but it perhaps is not as easily developed if it's outside of that green hatched area. Yeah, these maps you can zoom out and zoom in, so you can kind of see that there are a ton of parcels all over the city. Mentioned that there are over 3,000, but many of them are tiny. But we tried to show kind of the contiguous areas, which would be the most, of interest to developers. So that's why, it shows them, even if they're separate lots, if they're together, then it shows the combined acreage. And these numbers that you're seeing here is just the value of the parcel. the complete value of the parcel. And the color, as you see in the key here, is just the value per acreage, so that you can get a fair assessment across each parcel, so it's not just telling you that big parcels are worth more than little parcels. Again, it's showing city-owned properties, but probably the most of interest to developers are these bigger parcels out here, where here, for instance, there's 62 acres that are theoretically easily developed. And you can click here to add these development status things, which is, again, from the city's development review. If you click on them, you can get even more information about, from ProTrack, about what this development is. So for instance, this is the point, and you see it wasn't showing it as being developable anyway, but that's just something that's been through our review process. So it's just an example of things that you can see by clicking on the map. And if you zoom in, those push pins turn into polygons, so you can see this is a big area that was developed. Some of it is still available to be developed. And for instance, you know that this area up here is under review right now for rezoning. So just because it shows up here as being available for redevelopment or initial development, it may already have something planned. There may already be something there, but this is just a very simplistic assessment of criteria that we have based on land use and so on. And then the final map shows redevelopable areas, and this is actually just an update of a map that is in the comprehensive plan. These are the GSM, the growth, what's it called? What does GSM stand for? The growth strategies. Yeah, the growth strategies maps from the comp plan. So I did not just come up with these criteria. These already existed in the comp plan, and this is an update of these three criteria. So again, it's kind of simplistic because you're going to have these areas up on Market Street that meet all three, and it's largely because they are huge parking lots. It's car dealers and stuff. So they may disagree that it is not developed. However, according to these criteria, theoretically, in a different world, it could be developed as something else that would make even greater use of that land that doesn't involve small buildings and large parking lots and so on. So it is very subjective as far as what should be developed there. It's just simply using these simple criteria that were also used in the comp plan. Yes?
This is an incredible tool for city staff and I think also for the general public. And I'm sure it took a lot of time to pull all together. I know we're in the process of updating our GIS software, right? Is that correct?
Yes, it's always ongoing.
Sure. Will this be accessed via the ArcGIS?
This is a web map that is available only to city staff right now.
Okay.
But if the council would like, I can make it public.
And then if we were to make it public, is there any way to allow for it to syndicate to the county's GIS? I think that would be helpful from a navigation standpoint.
We could inform the county of the link, and they can have a link to it from their website as well. Just
like if I was clicking on a parcel that was of interest, and then you could get all the information from the county's tax records.
Oh, I can do that. Like you can have click on the map, and there could be a pop-up that could tell you whatever it is you want to know about the land. We have access to all the county's GIS information.
Okay, so that's something we could implement.
Yes, we often integrate stuff like that. So some of these things, if you click on it, I've already got it set up to show more about the vacant and buildable land. For instance, just a very short narrative here that this parcel is 137 acres, has an assessed value of over 23 million, 169,000 per acre. You know, and then again, just giving the caveat that area outside the green hatched may be less suitable, but we are making no warranty. We're not saying that it cannot be developed.
Yeah, again, phenomenal, but if we were going to open it to the general public, there was a way to pull at least the first page of a property tax records from the county on that,
Yes, I can add that.
it's a great tool.
You just want ownership records?
I think that would be great for anybody who is navigating the site. Whether public or private, I guess.
Okay, I can do that. Jennifer's overview gave a lot of the things away that are particular to these maps, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Like some of the property may be together, but it may be 3 or 4 people owning it. That's more difficult to sell or whatever, is that correct?
It is, but we're just trying to make clear that there is this amount of property available, and a developer may choose to try to, you know, negotiate with however many owners are involved, but we just want to make clear that there may be a greater area available, a contiguous area, even if they're owned by more than one person.
Okay. And when you mentioned that there are 3,000 vacant properties, are they owned by the city or?
No, they could be owned by anyone. It's
Okay.
just that according to our land use records, which are always subject to update, that it is vacant. It could be owned by anyone, and most of them are tiny. I mean, if you look at, let's go back up to the first map. Zoom out. Come on. A bunch of them are very, very small. You've got a bunch of them in the downtown area. You know, they're not contiguous. They're just kind of all over the place. You know, sometimes you get some, like right here, you know, that are together. So you know, presumably these, come on, you know, these 4 in a row that are all undeveloped would be, you know, more attractive to a developer than just a bunch of ones that are spread all over the place, even though most likely they are all owned by different people. And again, the ones that are owned by the city are shown in that hatched red.
So this one in the upper left corner with the red square, that's owned by the city? Help me out on that.
I think that's the fire headquarters.
But it's not vacant because it's not shaded.
Right, it's not blue, or it's not green, it's not being shown as vacant, it's just
City owned.
city-owned.
This is great.
Yeah, what a tool. Good work, wow.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mayor Saffo or Mr. Spears? We can't see you, but just wondered if you had any questions.
I'd just like to say thank you to the staff. Excellent tool and something that we've been talking about for quite some time. I'm glad y'all put it together. And it's very surprising that we have a lot more acreage than we anticipated. But thank you for putting that together, Tony and staff. Y'all did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Yeah, I would just chime in and say that it's a great tool, and I'm more so surprised that you impressed Luke.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or concerns or compliments? Thank you very much.
I've got one real quick question, maybe for Tony. When do we make a recommendation on whether to let the public access? I think it's a great public access tool, but
I think now is an appropriate time if that's what you'd like for us to do.
I think if it's available to us, it should be available to everyone. It's a phenomenal tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I
I
take
agree
care of
with that
today.
also.
Let us add the additional layers that you were mentioning, and then we'll go live with it as soon as that's available.
Okay.
We'll send you an email to let you know it goes live.
So we just have a consensus on that? Okay,
All right,
great, thanks again.
all right, thank you.
Very impressive.
Thank you.
So back to our city manager, Mr. Caudle.
Yes, ma'am. It appears as though about all we have left to talk about are closed item sessions, except for the budget items. So we'll just proceed with those. We'll proceed first by going to the questions that council had asked as a result at the last budget workshop. And you have been sent a memo that came from Laura Mortel with regard to your questions about the tax rate adjustment versus the fund balance. Laura, are you prepared to go over this? Sure.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I did not have a presentation, so I just wanted to let you know that we did find some items we did not use one-time fund balance for, about 500,000, and that equals a quarter of a cent. We recommend
Hear you very well. All right,
he's putting it up. So I'll start over. We found $500,000 that we did not use fund balance for. That is about a quarter of a cent,
Laura, sorry, I know everybody's probably already reviewed the presentation, but is it possible for us to pull up the email, the memo that you sent? At least the last page, I think, was helpful. Unless everybody says they've reviewed it and they're fine what they are, but, or if they have it in front of them. Thanks, Laura.
I'm afraid the mayor and Councilmember Spears may not be able to see it.
You emailed it on Friday, I think, though.
So $500,000, about a quarter of a cent. We could take down, use fund balance for that and take down the tax rate from 1.42 increase to 1.17. Staff is still recommending to continue with the 39.5 cents, which is the 1.242 increase. We have a lot of needs, and this was strategically done so we could remain solvent in the future years. As you could see, there's about $13 million that we know of for capital projects that we're going to need. We estimate the 5.3 million of fund balance right now, and so we still recommend the 39.5 cents.
Questions?
One, I appreciate you putting that presentation together. I think it was at my request after the budget work session, and I think it was consensus that everybody wanted to see this because it is important if we're proposing to increase taxes, that, in my opinion, that we do everything we can to lessen that burden on the general public. Oh, you got it. Great. And I am of the opinion that if we can utilize these extra 500,000 for one-time expenditures and still stay within above our policy of 20 to 25%, which this keeps us at, and reduce the tax burden, the proposed increased tax burden on the city of Wilmington residents, that is something that we should seriously consider and something I would be a proponent for.
Questions, Mr. Anderson?
I have not read this, so I'm curious. Could you just, is it the 500 in one chunk, or is it a bunch? Can you kind of just walk me through what you identified to use it, where you had identified to use fund balance?
Yeah, we went
I'll get
back.
a sentence together here at some point.
Yeah, I do not have a list of items for you in that memo, but we have some firefighter outfitting that we didn't use. We expected them to need it over the course of a couple of years, but we can remove that as one time. We found a shed for $600,000 or $6,000, furniture, and we had 2 contracts that we found that we could use one time.
And so staff wants to keep the tax rate higher just to have some extra money? Is that kind of like buffer?
It is,
Let me chime in here. The quarter-cent tax rate, the question is, do you want to keep the quarter-cent tax rate and keep the fund balance available for expenditures that are over and beyond? You already have $13 million in additional capital expenditures that you know you're going to have to face. And then we have a couple of other items that have come up over the weekend, actually Thursday and Friday of last week, that you're already being requested for. So the point here is that we can take the $500,000 out and use it for the one-time expenditures, lower the tax rate, but you already know you have additional funding needs in the upcoming year to be able to address.
I guess, I mean, I shut my work down Friday afternoon. I didn't look at this. I guess I was expecting a presentation and not, so I can't ask questions about it. So I'll just have to email them to you, I guess. Because, I mean, I don't know. I was curious about, you know, obviously you've got them here, all these different projects. So this is what you're talking about, Tony,
Yes,
this
sir.
blue sheet. And how much is it? I mean, can we just take a minute to look at this document?
You have until tomorrow night to do this.
Doesn't work. We're not here together. You can't get consensus. It's not of any, it doesn't help much. So,
I understand.
all right.
I have a quick question, and maybe it's in here. We historically have really kept the fund balance at about 30% because of where we live and hurricanes and all of that sort of thing. So if you use the 500,000 out of fund balance, what percentage would we have then?
it's on your screen, so it will bring, oh no, it's not on your screen. I don't know what a $500,000 would change that percentage, but you would have 3.3 million instead of the 5.3. So when we use, I'm looking at the screen right now. So for FY23, we have the appropriated fund balance of 1.3 million plus the assigned 1.5 million. So of the 5.3 million that is currently available, it's already gone down to 2.8 million. If we add another $500,000 to that, you're at 3.3 million. And that brings you to that 30%.
So the option B, if we were to utilize the 500 and reduce the proposed increased tax rate to 1.17, we would still remain at 30% fund balance
Yes, sir, we would.
Yes.
over our policy, but in accordance with our, what we typically in practice carry.
Mark?
You would essentially have $2 million left.
Neil?
Hello. Is the, just walk me through it, because this is the first time I've seen this. Is there a dollar, so that take that number in the percentage, what's the dollar? Is it dollars left over 30%?
If you added the $500,000 to the 2.8 that's already recommended, you're using 3.3. So you subtract that from the 5.3, so you get 2 million. And then you're still $2 million over the 30%.
Okay. And the argument I'm hearing is that this sheet with, I guess it's 2 pages, it has the blue and white lines, is how over budget we are on these projects. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that
We estimate 13.1, I believe.
Say that again?
13.1 million.
13 million, okay. And all we're gonna have over the 30% is 2.
Correct.
All right.
Okay, so, okay, as I look at this, excuse me, We'll still be at the 30% that we want to be, but staff is recommending that we stick with the 1.42, right?
Yes.
Percent, okay. And rationale for that is because of the number of projects that we have already in line, but many of them are over budgeted because of what's happening in the country, right?
That is correct. Inflation and the economy are driving all of the prices up. As you could see on some of those, they're almost doubled. Some of the projects are almost double than what we expected right now.
Okay, all right,
And that's only going to continue.
all right, cool. Plus, I think, Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, we're in I hate to call it Hurricane Alley, but, I don't want to call it Hurricane Alley, but we're close to Hurricane Alley, okay? And I think that, to me, the more we could have, and then I guess the thing I'm thinking about is, we raise it this time, if we come back, let's say 2 years from now, I'd hate to try to raise it again. I'm thinking, my thought is, get what we can get now, so I'm more in favor of sticking with the 1.42.
I would somewhat have to agree with that because, we just made this tremendous salary adjustment to try to not run a training school for many of our safety employees, and then everybody around us also raised their salary. So we're going to be in this sort of race to the top, and we're constantly going to have to do that. And we've seen that over the years, the numbers that have been here, that you make progress in salaries, and then everybody else around you makes progress and you're behind. So that would be my concern, and we certainly don't want to raise taxes every year. So to me, we should stick with what the staff recommends. You guys are the professionals. You have it figured out, and to me, we should stick with it. But Mr. Waddell?
I just have a couple other points of clarification. And if we don't know, that's understandable. I'll ask them tomorrow. So we have a $13 million estimated overrun on these capital projects that we're talking about, right?
Correct.
We've got, if we implement the option B to lower the tax rate on our citizens, lower the proposed improved tax rate on our citizens, we'll still have $2 million over our 30%, right?
Correct.
Which puts us at what percent?
I don't have that percent.
Okay.
I don't know if Jennifer.
But
can
$2 million,
calculate that,
so-
but 2 million.
2 million minus 13 million is 11 million. If we utilize that 11 million, what percent of the fund balance would we be at?
We might have to get that for you tomorrow.
Okay.
Good morning. Just want to make a couple clarifications. When we're looking at our capital projects, we fund some of those through debt issuance, which is in our debt fund, and we have a debt capacity. So when we get ready to fund these projects, we look at several things. We look at any available funding in our current other capital projects, any capital balances that are available. We look at these projects to see if they are projects that we can issue debt for. Some of them are more repair maintenance that we don't want to issue debt for. We have a capacity in our debt service fund that will help us cover these projects that are over our fund balance limit, because it is very important, I think I stress to all of you every year, that we maintain an adequate fund balance level because of the hurricanes. If we make a drastic drop in our fund balance, then that could potentially hurt us with our bond rating. They don't look at you're maintaining a 30%, but if you have a drastic drop, they look at why that is and what your plan is to build that back up. And after Hurricane Florence, I think we were all kind of shocked at the amount of damage and our quick response that we want to provide to the citizens of Wilmington. But we do have a debt capacity that we look at to fund these projects that come over, because the projects that you all have already approved become a priority. We want to complete those projects, and we can't help what conditions we are currently in the environment. But what that does is when we use that debt capacity, that limits what our next CIP plan can be and what tax rate adjustment we would have to put in place for that next plan. So as we talked about over the last couple years, we have a third CIP plan already planned out with a tax rate adjustment of 1.58 cents, but that's only covering about $50 million of projects. And of course, as we've shown you before, we have almost $300 million of projects that are needing to be done and come to council. So as we cover these overages with our fund balance and our debt capacity, that limits what that next, those next projects that we can bring forward and complete in the next plan. So just want to give that information to you. We won't be taking the $11 million all from fund balance and dropping that, because that would significantly hurt our financial stability. We would look at our debt service fund, what projects can we issue debt for, and what capacity we can use for those. I hope that helps.
Certainly does, but the question still kind of remains what that percentage would be at. Because you're utilizing that 11, I mean, the 11 million is still the cost.
It's
I understand
coming
where
out
it's
of-
coming from, but it's still a cost.
It is, and
Yeah.
it's not impacting the general fund balance percentage. It's coming out of a debt service fund capacity, which is separate from this calculation and this percentage.
Understood.
We can provide you a theoretical number of what taking $11 million out of the general fund balance would do to the percentage as measured against the percentage of expenditures.
I think that would be at a rudimentary level helpful for some decision-making up here.
Tony,
Yes, sir.
this may be a dumb question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. When's the last time we raised taxes?
I believe we raised taxes a half cent last year.
Okay. And could you explain what the foregoing of this tax increase does for the projects that we have in the pipeline?
It simply means there'll be a $500,000 less in cash that will be available for the projects that are in the pipeline, and we'll have to find that money either through taking the fund balance below the 30% or in our debt capacity in our debt model. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Does that make
It
sense?
does. It definitely does. Because I can see Luke's point. But I also believe that taxes get a bad rap. And I think it's our responsibility to articulate to the citizens of Wilmington, North Carolina, what we're doing with this money. And it may sound, it sounds like the norm for us. We're going to do these things on this list, these capital improvements. But I think the citizens of Wilmington would much rather understand the tax increase and see some tangibles. Say, hey, we're doing this, and actually see the things that we say we're going to do. I know that would go over better for me if I found your hand in my pocket. I would like to know why it was there, and then see the cause of it being there.
Yes, Mr. Anderson.
I might need Ms. Moretti. I'm not sure what this, y'all can decide. So we keep having this conversation for a year every year that, we talk about this 20 to 25, and then we talk about 30%. And somewhere then we get into conversation, well, we're in a hurricane. The reason we're at 30, as I understand it, is because we're in a hurricane. We're likely to get storms. So we're padding it to 30 in order to be in a better position should a storm come. Is that correct, incorrect? I can't, we need to come up with a policy. What is our policy, and what is the number? It isn't like, well, we really maybe we need 33. What is it? And we need to go with it. And whatever money over and above that, we need to find a way to give back, to spend and give back to the city. One
of the things that we do talk to y'all about is our main revenue sources are property taxes and sales taxes. So with property taxes, real estate taxes, their payments are due January. So we're using our fund balance to help pay for operations to get us until those taxes start coming in. We do receive motor vehicle taxes and business property taxes throughout the year, but the major big lump sum of tax revenue that we use to fund most of our expenses, we really are not seeing until November, December. So we're using fund balance to help pay for operations. With sales tax revenue, we're on a 3-month lag. So the sales tax that is paid by the consumers in, let's say, December, we're not receiving that until 3 months later. So again, we're using fund balance to help pay operations while there. So in addition to the sales tax and the property tax as our main sources of revenue, we're relying on fund balance to get us through those months to cover operations. We also have our vulnerability to emergencies. So we increased our tax policy to be 20 to 25% back in 2018, with the caveat that anything that we have when we close out the fiscal year, come November when we bring that to you, because it takes us several months, we are on an accrual basis, so we really don't know what our year end is going to be until 90 days after June 30. Then we bring that back to you. Anything over 30%, we would recommend that council put back towards the debt service fund to pay for capital projects and other needs. Since we put that policy in place in 2018-19, we've had a hurricane every year that we've had to go into those funds, and we didn't have any funding available above that 30% to recommend to council to put back to the debt service fund. Last year was the first year that we did not have a hurricane that used that funding, but as Mr. Cottle mentioned before, we were already talking about the Harrelson building and purchasing that, so we allocated those fund balance to be used to purchase that building. So within, from July 1 through November, when we're closing out the year, there are certain things that could come up that we're using that. But if we don't use it, then that will be a recommendation to put towards the debt service fund, which then would go towards these additional capital projects and funding these overages that we have. So that's why we have the policy the way we have it.
I hear you, and I know almost everything you said I'm fully aware of, and we go through it every year. What is the number? Is it 30? I mean, because every time, are you looking, is 30 our threshold, or is it something in your mind? Is it really 32, 33? What is it? Because you're talking about, I need all this money for all the recurring, all the stuff that we don't really see,
Right.
that we don't need to see or want to see, but I want to quit having an argument about what our number should be. It's 30, as I understand it.
30 is our practice, and the reason I say our practice is because we don't want to violate our own policy. So that's why we say a minimum of 20 to 25%. So if we have all these needs come up and we have to use fund balance for it, and we close the end of the year and we're at 24%, we're still good. We're still viewed as being financially stable because we have not gone below our own policy. Right. So the 30% comes in because of the 3-month lag, the property tax, that leg that we're using, and then our vulnerability. If we have to dip into fund balance, we can still close the year and still be financially stable in the eyes of our debt purchasers and our rating agencies, and just for the community to know that we have a good handle on that, we're not dwindling down.
So using 30 is the number, that's a number you use as well. It's not just in my mind.
No, that's the number that we use, that we want to see that we're at. If we're below that, that's fine, as long as we're not below the 20 to 25%.
We're trying to stay at 30 for the reasons you just expressed.
We're trying to for fiscal stability.
Yes. So, I guess unless, maybe some sense change in there, but we're going from whether we're talking about whether we're going to have $2 million over that number or $2.5 million over that number. Is that right? If on these two plans, right?
Right.
Either way, we got 13 million over here. And what you got up and told us, I think a minute ago, there's other ways we pay for this. It's not going to come out of.
Depending on the types of projects and if we can issue debt for them. Yes.
So, all right. And you're saying that it's also, so that's I guess it's just hard for, in your mind, you know, I know how I'm going to pay for all the, you know, I got different strategies how I'm going to pay for all this overages, but most of them would be how? What's the, in your back of your mind, are you concerned about this 13 million? How are we going to pay for it?
Always concerned about how that impacts us going
Turn the wrong word.
forward.
Do you think we will be able to pay for it?
We will be able to, it will just impact our future plans.
It takes away CIP down the road.
Exactly, yes. Other projects, if we see more projects come in over, that it takes away from future funding that we have for the future projects that we have. We talk about, you know, transportation projects and different things. As we use these funds up, that's less, unless you want to, you know, increase taxes for the capital side of it to do those plans. That's what it will result in. This $0.25 now to pay for the operations. If we use these funds, reduce the tax rate now, and then we use more funds in our debt capacity, when we go out for our next plan, that means that's an adjustment based on what projects you want to finance in the next plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Waddell?
It sounds to me like it's really a debt service fund, but I know we talk a lot about the fund balance, but it doesn't matter apparently, because if we have to, anything above 30% goes back into debt service fund. We need to see some reporting on the debt service fund. I try and read everything that comes to me. I have not read much at all about where we keep the debt service fund, what levels we need it at, what drops us below the AAA bond rating. This is important stuff. It affects the tax rate, and it affects the increased tax rate that we're giving to our citizens. I'm not trying to be difficult up here, but it's important. I know you know that. So I would like to see some reporting on the debt service fund before we decide to levy an increase in taxes to our citizens who are struggling everywhere right now, at the gas tank, at the grocery store, everywhere. I had another point, but I got excited. So I may come back to that point in a second. Thank you.
We'll come back to you. Mayor Saffo or Kevin Spears, would either of you like to comment further?
Well, you know, I appreciate the debate here. It's a good debate. We always have it. I think we've always been responsible in respect to any kind of a tax increase. We're very sensitive to the citizens' needs. But we also have got a lot of pressures put on us as a council, first and foremost, to finish the projects that the voters voted on. The 2014 transportation bond, where people have been waiting years for some of these green, the Cross City Trail and the acceleration, hopefully, of finishing that project. And we know what the costs have done to that. Nobody anticipated an 8% inflation rate, nobody. And I think that our debt models, when we looked at these projects years ago, we felt pretty comfortable with the 2.5% inflation rate. We could cover a lot of the cost of that, but we've had a dramatic increase. So it comes down to choices. Either we're going to go back and start whittling back and looking at some of our CIP projects and some of the projects that even our citizens have voted on, or we're going to have to bite the bullet and make some tough decisions. But we have never looked at these tax increases lightly. We've looked at them very seriously, and we've gone into some pretty in-depth information about making certain that the decisions that we're making are good decisions. I know we were sensitive last year when we were having to make some adjustments to our tax rate based on what the county's tax increase was, which was 5 cents. And here we were looking at a 0.5 cent just to try to accommodate the things that our citizens are asking us for and have voted on. Plus, the fact is that the pressure that is being put upon our citizens and our city from people that are using our services every single day, especially in transportation costs and the repaving of roads and all the improvements that we have to make, continue to increase. This region is not slowing down by no means. It's only increasing. And that pressure upon us and our infrastructure continues to increase. And a lot of this goes to our CIP. Plus, the fact is we're talking about the redevelopment of the north side, at the north end of downtown, especially with the grocery store. Well, I can tell you any grocery store is going to be built in downtown Wilmington is going to require some public parking is going to be part of that, which is not even in this equation. So I think that the city staff is anticipating some of the things that haven't even hit us yet, but in addition to the things that we have to do as elected leaders to finish the projects that our citizens voted on. The Cross City Trail is an important project, especially on Greenville Loop Road, where those citizens have been demanding and asking us for that. the MLK gym, which is desperately needed, and the people in our community that have been asking for that for quite some time, and other projects that we have on there. So, I appreciate the debate. I think we need to seriously look at all of the things that have been brought forward, but at the end of the day, we're gonna have to make some tough decisions, or we're gonna have to cut back on some of our CIP projects.
I remember my secondary point.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Waddell?
I agree wholeheartedly. These CIP projects are important. It's important to what we are supposed to be doing up here as a city. We've assigned 1,500,000 for affordable housing. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the 500,000 is the amount of fund balance that we're talking about, trying to keep the tax rate as low as possible.
That is correct.
What if we just assign $1 million rather than 1.5 and keep the tax rate, the property tax rate low? That will also assist in keeping the housing affordability issue at bay.
Yeah, but just make sure I understand that. That's an idea that instead of the 1.5 for affordable housing, you would do 1 and take the other 500 so that you didn't raise.
Correct. To then keep the tax rate at 1.17, tax rate adjustment at 1.17 rather than 1.42. So that affordable housing would go to, the assigned fund balance of 1.5 would go to $1 million. We'd utilize that 500 without decreasing our fund balance. And then, in my opinion, that would also positively affect housing affordability by keeping the property tax rate at a lower level, which is really what we're trying to do with this affordable housing money at 1.5. It's an idea.
Okay, I would disagree with that, because I wouldn't want to put, one of the things that our citizens have said to us over and over and over again is they've talked about the need for affordable housing. That's one of the main things that they've been saying over and over. And I'd hate to see us put on the backs of those persons who really need places to live the responsibility of, supporting this budget. I think that we need to keep what we have assigned for the affordable housing piece. And again, I'm in favor of the 1.42.
Yeah, Mr. Anderson?
I probably need some time to digest what Luke's brought up, but I mean, we're confused. I think we're confused if we don't believe that the tax increase is going to be passed on to those people trying to afford stuff. In other words, if you're if you're renting a piece of property to someone and you get passed on cost in our market where, there's so much demand, that cost just gets passed along and makes it less affordable. So, I mean, you're making it harder. I mean, I realize we have other things and other commitments and our basic core stuff. That's the reason we're raising it primarily, is for police, fire, and all the things Margaret alluded to early on. So that we have to do that. But any tax increase is going to raise rent across the city. So it's a valid point. I don't know how those numbers correlate. Does 500,000 and whatever extra 1.17. I don't know the math there, but it's probably hard to ever come up with the math to figure out how it affects rent across the board. But raising taxes is going to raise rents. We have 1.5 set aside, as Luke mentioned. Is that all divided up into different programming at this point, or it's just a pot?
It's a reserve for council to decide what to do with related to affordable housing.
So it's not already like funnel into this program or that
No,
program?
not that one.
It was designed to be available for gap financing, similarly to the way that Starway came towards us. And
So a lot of the projects that might come along, not necessarily say some of these programs where we tend to run out of funds because we have too many applicants. It's not designed for that, right?
No, sir. It
Okay.
is designed to be gap financing.
Okay, thank you.
Are we aware of these tax credit projects? Are there some on the horizon that perhaps we don't know about, but staff knows about, which are going to require more than $1 million in gap financing? Because I know sometimes that makes the project either make or not. So,
I am unaware of any of those, but we can check with staff for you.
Suzanne?
We currently, and this will be presented with the update for the public hearing for the 5-year consolidated plan tomorrow night, but we currently have tax credit gap financing application request in for 72 units and another 81 units. So that's the 3.5 million that you all assigned in the current year. And then we're projecting 60 additional units with the 1.5. And as Mr. Cottle explained, those funds are looked at as gap financing to help leverage other funds, in particular low-income housing tax credit, but not necessarily. From what we hear, of course we don't know until the application comes forward, there is interest from developers, you know, in bringing more projects forward, but we don't have those applications yet. We wouldn't necessarily expect to have those applications yet either. So from my perspective, I would expect more requests for gap financing in the future. And as you all are aware, just like what's been discussed with the inflation, all of these projects are need additional support.
based on your experience, is what we have proposed sufficient for that? And what if we took a third of that, 30% of that away?
I think what we've seen in the projects that have come forth, including Starway, which of course was funded with the, hopefully, ARPA money, the $3.5 million, you know, those projects required significantly more per unit than we had seen in the past because of inflation. So we're looking at an average of, or around $25,000, $26,000 per unit of gap financing needed. And a tax credit project, you know, you're looking at, for a senior housing project or a 9% project, you're looking at 60 to 72 units. For the 4% projects or bond projects, those can be much larger, and we know that there are some developers who are exploring 4% projects, and we would anticipate them coming forward if they get, you know, all their other pre-development things in place. And what we're trying to do at your with your support and guidance and direction is, of course, respond to the information we got from the Bowen report, which shows that we have at least 450 unit gap in supply in rental housing for people who make 80% or below. So essentially for most people who are earning a living, working in our local economy. Those are the folks who are struggling to find rental housing that they can afford. That doesn't mean they're not renting housing, it just means it's taking every bit of what they make to live there and putting them in a precarious situation.
So it sounds as if you think we ought to stick with the 1.5. Because to even begin to fund some of these projects that are in front of us, much less on the horizon. Is that what I'm to take from what you're saying? I mean, we need guidance.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I've got to interject here. If you brought any program director before council, I think they would tell you that they do not have enough money in their budget. Municipal budgeting is a balancing act.
Of course.
And you know that, and what you have before you in terms of the 1.42 cent tax increase is the manager's best guess at what it takes to accomplish all of your objectives with regard to next year's funding. And while I, excuse me, I very much appreciate that affordable housing is a big priority, I think any divisional manager, any project manager who comes before you will tell you that you're not going to have enough money.
I understand. Other questions, concerns?
Tony? Yep, I got a comment.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Sure.
I feel like I'm in King Solomon's shoes here, where he had to split the baby, because Luke, that was quick thinking on your feet of taking $500,000 from affordable housing to help keep us from raising taxes in our area. But I can see the headline now for all of the news media where city council takes $500,000 from affordable housing. Gonna look bad. And like I said, it's a good idea, but it would only be a good idea if we had something new to come up where we replace that $500,000 in the affordable housing or whatever we're going to use for affordable housing, or if we upped it to $1 million. That's the only way I could sign on with that. So I don't think it was a bad idea, but I would have to say if we went in that direction, I would be looking for something super quick to replace it and to up the ante on it.
Councilman Spears, I think you and I are going at, and actually everybody here is going after the same thing. We're just looking at it from a couple different angles. And I appreciate y'all's willingness to look at just maybe kind of an outside the box idea. I saw a delta of 500,000 and where we had assigned 1.5 and said, well, if we can take that 5 and keep the tax rate, the proposed tax rate adjustment lower than by 1/4 cent, I think that's a win for housing affordability. And I don't know how to calculate the value on this, but I would bet that the proposed rent increases that would come about from a 1.42 cent tax rate adjustment would far outweigh anything we can do with $500,000 in gap financing.
Any other questions and concerns? Thank you, Ms. Mortel. We appreciate it, all your hard work.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, also coming out of your budget workshop 10 days ago was a question about the human services competitive process. Specifically, what could we do for those entities that were going to be up against the $50,000 limit and were going to receive a cut as a result of their being up against the $50,000 limit? Suzanne, are you prepared to? We'd just like to give you an update on what would happen if we step that cut back down over a 2-year period.
So, Margaret.
Yes, yes.
Just to layer on what he just, we had a conversation, some of us last time, and I was one of the ones I asked Tony just to, I can't remember because I'm doing it from memory, but there were like 3 organizations that went from like, and I'm ballparking it here, 60, 70,000 to 27,000 in 1 year, and ask them to look at how could we, instead of just torpedoing them one time, let them absorb this new policy of everything staying below 50, just to see what those numbers look like. So that's the idea here. If that helped, it might have complicated it more, I'm not sure.
Just a quick,
Will you pull the mic down? Thank you.
a quick review of where we are. So you all will recall we modified or revised the process to allow for more agencies, especially agencies who had not received funding in the past. The budget was increased by 10% using our funding rubrics. We scored all of the proposals, and then they fell out into 4 tiers. And in addition to that, we set a cap of $50,000 per program, or no more than $75,000 per organization. We had 38 programs apply, representing 35 organizations. 10 of those were new, for a total of 1.4 million change in request and a budget of 689. So looking at 7 agencies who had been prior recipients of funding through this process and whose scores put them in tiers that left them with a recommended grant of less than their prior year funding. We're looking, you can see on this spreadsheet, the last column, there was 105 to 30 difference for these 7 agencies from what they would receive in 22 current year to what was recommended. And you see the agencies listed there and their scores. So to look at lessening the impact on the budget, we looked at any of the agencies who would receive 5,000 or less in impact or reduced funding, just leaving them where they are in terms of the recommendation. But for those who would have a loss of more than 5,000, we calculate the difference between what they got in FY22 current year to what was recommended, and then give them half of that to help buffer that decrease. And so that would be, they would receive that buffer amount in the coming year, and then in the second year, they would be down to the recommended amount. So this would help them hopefully adjust to this change in funding. So that comes up to an additional, bottom line, an additional $48,182 in funding to
Suzanne,
ease the blow. Yes, sir.
I hate to interrupt, but let me ask a quick question. So prior to this year's announcement or advertisement of the 2023 budget, did these agencies not know that we cap grant funding at $50,000?
Yes, sir, they were told that. All agencies that apply for city funding are required to attend a workshop. So we held workshops virtually where we go over the entire application, all of the requirements, and all of the changes in the process. And for any agencies who couldn't make the workshops, we also, upon request, met with them individually. So we have sign-in sheets, and we don't take your application if you don't attend the workshop. So that's the first requirement. So yes, sir, they were aware of this. Various agencies send staff.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is interesting, but, so obviously that's why in the requested fiscal year '23, nobody's requested over $50,000.
We
Here
did have
in
a
this
few who
list.
requested over 50,000, but because that was the maximum, we just put that's the maximum.
Okay, so just very quickly, looking at this in front of me, if you go down to the bottom and link, they requested the 50, and last year, we gave them 78, and you're recommending 37, so if you scale them up, they would get $8,000 more than they asked for. Is that how I'm to read that? And then
Well, they did ask for more than 50, but we just entered that as 50 because that's the maximum.
Okay,
Yeah.
so where the column that says requested, you, no matter what they requested, you took it to the max. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
That was the maximum you could request. Sorry for that confusion. I will share with you that Link has not expended their funds that they received last year from your one-time grant award yet.
But they could get more than the 50, they could get up to 75,000 if they have different programs within the same organization.
They could, and they did not apply for more than one program.
Okay, because I thought in the past maybe he had applied for more than,
They have in the past, but in FY '22, they only applied for one program, and they received 78,606.
okay.
In cycles prior to that, they have applied for multiple programs, but that's they determine what they're going to apply for.
Right, gotcha. Other questions and concerns for Suzanne?
I'm glad you explained that, because that was confusing to me.
Mr. Anderson?
I just compliment, I didn't, when you left here, whenever we were together last, I didn't know how you were gonna come up with it. And I think you did a very nice job of just, you identified the very ones that were, the four at the bottom, and that took huge hits, that can really almost change their level of service, because we've changed policy, and I think the policies were right policy. It's just the goal here, I thought, was just to try to not really damage some really good organizations. So I don't know if, it's kind of random to go in now with a scalpel, but maybe to Margaret's point, Link, maybe you cap it at 50. I don't know, because that's, even though it's I'm not sure if that's what she was saying, but in other words, 58's over our max. But I don't know if that one you wanted to make 50, but I'm not sure what we keep talking about it, like Warm, for example. That was one that stuck out to me because a lot of our priorities with housing and all the things that we've already hashed in the budget, if you want to cut them that, what was it, half? Yeah, no, not quite half, but a big cut. So thank you for doing it.
You can't get everything on the chart, but this also doesn't show the monies they've gotten from other places. Like, I think one chart we had showed what they had gotten, what they, I believe, were receiving from the county, or maybe what they requested from the county.
I believe we provided that as some supplemental information in one of your packets.
Right, so that sort of helped figure out.
Yeah.
We all think they're worthwhile. At the same time, we have a process. We agreed on that process, and maybe for next year, we need to change the process. Maybe we need to say, look, we can't cut people like this, that, I don't know. It seems to me we're kind of late in the ball game here to start picking and choosing winners and losers. But I do think it's a valid point when you're cutting somebody so drastically, but that must be what the direction we gave and to operate.
All right, just a quick question. The cuts were based on their application, correct? Like, you know, we've got them in tiers, and they're in tiers based on what they said to us in the application. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Yes, but, I mean, the whole conversation here is because of the new policy of 50,000. And we did that, as I recall, to try to get more new organizations. That was one of the goals. Am I right there?
Yes, knowing that there would be
New people coming along, we wanted to.
more people, there was a maximum that was recommended.
Well, the point here was, we changed it to 50. They got 78. We changed it to 50. Right there, you're getting a 28,000. If you got 100, score, you're still getting 50. So that was the big change. The whole idea here is just to kind of wean them, split the thing in half for a year, and then they go to the number they actually scored at. But I need to digest it. I'm not completely advocating it, but I think she did exactly what I think we asked. So
I agree.
very much appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can't take credit for that. That was Laura Mortel.
Well, you ladies are hard workers, and you're a good trio to try to figure this stuff out. I think it was an idea that we would sort of, to use an old term, spread the wealth, that we would try to, include other people with different ideas and come forward and try to encourage other people to provide these kinds of necessary community services. But other comments and questions?
An observation. I think a day will come soon, and the sooner the better, where the county and the city put in a pool of money from each and have the people with the nonprofits come before a selected board made up of us and them, or your staff and their staff, because if any of these groups are able to go out and get grants on their own, good for them. But when it comes to the monies that city taxpayers are paying and furthering what county taxpayers are paying, which includes us, it got like this once way before, and we've got to get a handle back on it, because we don't know what they may be doing something on their last day before they vote on their budget to skew some of these numbers. We don't know that. And I think that a county this small, that's this concentrated with this number of nonprofits, it needs to go before a unified board and make sure everybody's getting treated fairly. And that's not something, I don't think that just needs to be a wish. That's something that we need to talk about doing sooner rather than later. Because it's not that it's that much money. I mean, the percentage of our total budget, it's a lot of money, but it's not a great big percentage of our budget, but it's still important, especially to these people. So that's my observation.
Charlie, that's interesting, and I had never even thought about that. So basically, we would have a policy of a dollar amount of our budget that would go into a board that was unified with the county. County would do the same. We would appoint board members. The county would appoint board members, or we'd have our staff members there, and they would go through our programs, but they would probably have joint allocations and how to figure all that out. That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, and I would hope that the staff might pursue this.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem,
Yes.
you actually already have a draft model of that in place with the opioid settlement.
Right.
We actually have a staff committee as well as an elected official committee that is reported to by the staff committee. It makes recommendations to both boards. And in that situation, certainly either board could decide not to follow the recommendation. You can't give away or contract away your right to decide your budget, but it certainly could be a coordinated effort. So there's already a roadmap in place.
What do the others think? Mr. Waddell's shaking his head. I think it's something that's worth pursuing.
Let us have some conversation with the county about that.
Great. That sounds great. So I guess we'll have more thoughts about this, whether my feeling is we have a policy and we probably ought to, at least this year, stick with it, and maybe next year we make some exceptions. Some of these things are longer than a 1 year, perhaps, commitment in some of the things that we do. So I know the staff works hard on this, and we appreciate it. We don't want to undermine your work here.
We work at your direction. These awards are 2-year awards.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. But we could always make an exception to that if we end up with tremendous amount of extra money somewhere down the road. We could figure out how to put it to best use.
Thank you.
I think that, yes, thank you, Suzanne. We appreciate that.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we've had 2 late-breaking developments last week on Thursday and especially on Friday. And I emailed information to all the council on Saturday. I apologize for the lateness of the delivery. We have 2 items that have come up that deserve attention with regard to the budget process, and we'll handle what I hope will be the less complicated one first. We have received a proposal from the Legal Aid of North Carolina to establish a Second Chance Wilmington project. This is a project that will assign attorneys and paralegals to a process that will allow some folks to potentially get records expunged with regard to, and get them back into more productive society. I became aware of this program first through the county manager by him letting me know that they were going to fund a portion of it. And then I was contacted directly by Evelyn Bryant about it on Friday, I believe. Regardless, you received a narrative in your email about the project, and then you received a proposed budget that was attached there too. The total budget for the project is $386,000. And the share that would be, or the amount that would be shared between the city and the county is $351,770. We would pay 40% under the 60-40 composition that we've used before with the county, which would amount to $140,470.80. And I know that it is late in the process, but I also know that the county had already promised the 60% amount to this particular effort, and I wanted to bring this to you for your attention as to whether or not you wanted to address this with your budget.
Questions, comments?
It looks like a worthwhile project and something I would certainly want to review in future years. Doesn't seem overly fair to everyone who just went through the entire process for a year to get funding, to then have someone come in at the 11th hour and ask for triple what we've given out to everybody else.
I know the need, I know the advantages of having a person be an advocate for an individual who the system oftentimes is not favorable, So I know it's a last-minute call, but because I know the need, because I know a number of people who can't get back to their families, can't get back to getting a job, because they've got this on their record, we're even hoping that eventually they'll remove that line from the job application, have you ever been arrested and stuff like that, because it really targets a certain population. And so I'm in favor of it, even though I know it's a last-minute ask, but because I know the great work that that they do, and because I know that the need is so great, especially in my neighborhood.
Other comments?
Yes, the need didn't just happen last week. We have policies like everybody else does. Personally, from where I sit, this is a program that should be funded entirely by the county. This is not a municipal service. And the lines have gotten so blurred over the last number of years about what we're responsible for and what they're responsible for. That's the North Carolina Legal Aid Society. The county is an extension of North Carolina, not the city. And I agree with Luke. It's a good project. I agree with Clifford that it's needed. Let the county, let it fall into the lap of the county. We're participating in that. We're participating in that through our city taxes that we pay to the county.
Mr. Anderson?
I guess I'll comment. I agree with Luke. I mean, Link does some awfully good things in the community too, and we're cutting them off the knees. So, I mean, we just cut theirs 70 out of, chart's not up here, but it was significant. And some other folks, and they went through our process. County handles the courts, so it feels like mission creep. You know, we pay the same taxes to the county as someone that doesn't live in the city. But yeah, I can think of a couple individuals that I know well that I coached that could really benefit from having the record expunged. But I just, gosh, I don't feel right doing it this way. I mean, I guess it's the problem. I don't know how things come along like this where we don't even, I mean, we didn't even have a budget workshop to talk about this. It's just like throw another burger on the grill at the last second. I don't like doing it that way. Thank you.
Mr. Spears or Mayor Saffo, would you like to comment? Guess the answer is no. I do think it's valid, and I think the city has played a role in the past. I was quite an advocate for the city instituting this drop the box on job applications where people did not have to initially say whether they were a felon or have been convicted of a crime or whatever, and would get through at least the first step of a job application. So that is a role that the city can play on things like that. But I'd have to agree with Mr. Robinbart. We're already paying a good portion of this through our tax money, and the county commission is simply an extension of state government, and they are to implement the programs that are oriented from the state. But be happy to hear what other people have to say. Okay. Do you have what you need?
Yes, ma'am. I believe I do.
On to the next thing.
On to the final item, which is going to take, I'm sure, a good deal of discussion. We've been working with the Wilmington Housing Authority for a number of months now with regard to their mold remediation issues that are going on with their apartments. They've had to move many folks, 151 families at last count, out of moldy units and into hotels. In those hotels, they not only have to pay for the rent that goes along with the hotel room, but they also have to pay a subsidy to the families because they are not available in the room. The cooking facilities are not available, so they're paying double on that. They're also paying for the remediation of the units, which includes not only mold, but also some HVAC work, as well as testing that goes along with the proposal. The Housing Authority has found itself in a very difficult predicament in that the money that they have been using for operational purposes, it runs out this week. And they have come to both the city and the county, and we have been working through this over the course of the past 2 weeks, trying to figure out what we could help them with and what we could not help them with. There is money available from HUD on a regular basis, and then they have also applied for special grant funds from HUD, and they are continuing to look for special grant funds from other sources, including the state of North Carolina. But the fact remains they have no cash flow beginning this week, and they have...
Excuse me.
Yes.
I've just been informed that we have technical difficulties with the mayor and Mr. Spears, and so it would probably be appropriate for us to take a very brief recess of 5 to 6 minutes and see if we can get this resolved.
Thank you.
me, Margaret?
Yes. Mr. Spears, are you
Okay.
there?
I am here.
Okay, great. Penny, do I need to take a roll call again? Okay, we're all
Yeah,
here.
we need to go back.
Now, so I will again refer back and recognize our city manager, but I'm sorry to say, I think we need to start from the beginning on this one.
I can't remember what I said 3 seconds ago, much less 30
No,
minutes ago.
no.
Well, I think they want to go back to the issue prior. They could not.
Oh,
speak.
Yeah, we
okay.
need to go.
Okay.
Oh,
Thanks, Neil.
okay.
Do you need a recap from the staff again, or did you hear that?
No, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you now.
Okay, great. I just wanted to voice my support for this initiative. And I think it's Charlie who always talks about beating the dead horse, but I'm gonna beat the dead horse this time on this one. I'm in this position to impact the lives of the citizens of Wilmington, and so an effort like this, it didn't come at the beginning of the budget process. It was kind of sprung out there, but it's something that is quite needed to help our citizens if we talk about the tough time that people are experiencing within our community. And that's all people. That's not just from one specific community. That's all over our community. People are experiencing legal issues. If in some instances, if you have a criminal record, you're not allowed to live in certain places. You're not allowed to work certain places. You're not allowed to even receive an education. So that's piggybacking off of what Councilman Barnett said. And so I think an initiative like this is needed, and it really falls in line with the Rise Together initiative, which is more than just a sign that says Black Lives Do Matter. We've talked about inclusivity, and so this is an example of inclusivity, and this is also an example of us doing tangible things with the resources that we have and the partnerships that we have with the county and ultimately the state. So I think this is a good effort, and I'm definitely in support of it.
Thank you, Mr. Spears. Are there any other questions or comments about that issue?
Yes, I'd like to ask a question, Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to ask a question of Tony and staff. I know that this just kind of popped up, and we've gone through this whole budget process, and we're sitting over here trying to find, as they say, coins in the cushions. My question is this: I know that several years ago, Ben David had an initiative where there was a number of people that their records were expunged, and I know that process went through the DA's office and worked very diligently. I think there was about 400 or 500 people that were impacted by that. First, I guess I'd like to know is when do they want to implement this thing immediately, or is it something that's happening that we're working on with the DA's office? Can it be something that we can look at further down into next year's budget when some of these things come before us, so that we can have a little bit more in-depth discussion with DA's office and stuff? All this, can you kind of give me a little bit more insight on that, please? I'm in support of it, but I just want to kind of get a little bit more information as to how fast this thing is moving. Why isn't it being done the way it was done last time when Ben was doing this? And is this going to be something that's going to be ongoing? Tony?
Mr. Mayor, as best I can tell from the written information that I got about the program, and it's going to be ongoing, and that they are anticipating that it will begin with the new fiscal year, which will be July 1, but it does not specify that in the written documentation that I received or that you received.
Okay.
Tony,
Yes, sir.
I do know that there is an expungement clinic scheduled for July 22nd. The phone lines for taking the information down is live right now. But I think this was something that they thought you could do going forward, because the amount of people that are helped are nothing in comparison to the amount of people that need help. So, you know, it was something that all parties involved thought to do to help more people going forward. And so I guess that's why you're getting it at such a late time. And also, I just wanted to ask this to you and to anybody in finance or whatever. Is there any part of this that ARPA funds may satisfy? Or, and if not, or do we need to look into it? But we need to look into it if we haven't looked into it, is what I'm saying.
I don't know. I'm going to ask that Jennifer Moretti come forward. We're hitting this with her, hitting her with this cold. So I'm not sure what answer we're going to get, Councilman Spears.
Good morning.
I'm staying tuned.
With the ARPA funds, the real connection there is how it relates to COVID. And the impact from COVID and recovery from COVID. So what I can do is look at this request and see how it mirrors up with the guidance that we're getting for the use of ARPA funds and bring that back to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I think that would help all of us with the decision making for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Spears. Mr. Rivenbark?
Yes, Kevin, Mayor, I don't know where you got cut off or whatever, but I'm going to go back and bore everybody with my comments. This is a worthy project. Luke said so. Clifford reiterated his support for it. Don't disagree with him at all. It's who pays for it. This is not a city function. There are states in America where you either live in a city or you live in a county. In North Carolina, you live in cities, but you're within a county. And they have, and the lines are drawn very clearly that we have responsibilities, they have responsibilities. The county is an extension of the state government. We serve at the pleasure of the General Assembly. They could do away with our charter tomorrow. Counties are here, the courts, the jails, the health, education, welfare, those are projects, those are responsibilities of the county, not the city. So I don't disagree with you that the project is needed, it's worthy and will help, but it's not for, that's not a city function. The county should take this, and believe me, we participate. Whatever they pony up, city taxpayers have skin in that game. So those are my comments.
Any other comments? I would have to agree with Mr. Rivenbark, but want to say clearly that I think it's a valid issue and it's a valid program, but it's a program for the courts. And, you know, we always get stuck with this kind of thing of trying to pay for things, but this is clearly a county issue. And so I think we just need to remember what our roles are. But I do think it's valid, and as I said before, I think Mr. Spears and the mayor were not on. The city has done some things in this area that we were able to do, like the drop the box, and we voted on that, and we pulled that forward so that people on their applications, at least for the city, didn't have to declare whether they were a felon or not on their initial application. So that's the kind of thing we can do administratively to help in these types of situations, but I do believe this is a role of the courts and therefore should be paid for through the county budget, which we certainly contribute a major portion of their budget. But any other questions, concerns?
Yep, I got one more concern, and I hear you all. I hear you, Charlie. I hear you, Margaret. I hear you, Luke, Neil. But I mean, it's funny to me when we decide to what's outside of our realm and what isn't. I think if anybody watches our meetings, they see us ping pong back and forth about what we can and what we can't do. And I think this is something that we can do, and I think this is something that we should do. And if the ARPA funds are available and helps us to do it, then we should do it. But I find it highly ironic when we sit up here and say, well, you know what, this is just outside of our scope. We're citizens of the county. Let the county handle it, because then we push back on the county for things that we do that they don't help us do. So I just think this is something that we should do.
Believe me, Kevin, there have been many votes in the last several years that I have gone along with that I didn't feel like the city had any business doing. So it's not like that I've dug my spurs in, but this is clearly something that is a county function. They have jumped up and volunteered to do this and put us down for 50%. I don't know if we were consulted on that or not, but this is, or 40%, whatever, but it doesn't matter. You take our 40% and what their 60% is and do the math. It ain't 60-40. And that's not so much the problem, is the split. It's that's not something that municipalities do. And we keep, we keep flirting with that. That's not what our taxpayers expect from us. They pay county taxes and they expect the county government to do that.
Clearly, our taxpayers anticipate us in positively impacting their lives. I think they do.
They need to look to the county.
I think they're looking to both.
Okay, well, I think one idea that came through that is that Jennifer is going to check about the ARPA funds and see if there's any possibility to meet this need of the counties by using that funding source. Any other questions or comments? Great, we'll move on if the city manager will keep us moving here.
Thank you, ma'am. The last item is something I was trying to do a description on earlier, and I'll try to backtrack a bit. We've been working for a number of weeks now with the Wilmington Housing Authority with regard to their mold remediation issues associated with several of the housing developments that they have throughout the city. They currently have 151, or at least last count that I heard, 151 families that are housed in hotels while they're rehabbing these units, remediating the mold in these units. In that 151, they are put up in hotel rooms where they do not have existing cooking facilities, so they're also paid a stipend that goes along with paying for the hotel room that pays them for the food that they consume during their residency in the hotels. There have been a number of issues that have cropped up along the way with regard to availability of hotels and those types of things. We've tried to find other locations, rental units into which we could place these families. But essentially, this program with the Wilmington Housing Authority has pretty much exhausted their cash flow with regard to especially the remediation and then the operational aspects of their ongoing initiatives. In this case, there was a request made of the Housing Authority as to how much money they would need in order to be able to meet the capital costs associated with remediating these mold issues. We asked them about capital cost because we did not see it as the city's role to get into paying operational costs associated with the Housing Authority. We see the ability to provide affordable housing in the city as an option that the city already engages in by talking with or working with developers, working through programs that we have with regard to the actual construction and rehabbing of units. So we asked them for a calculation as to what the total amount would be for capital cost associated with the remediation of this mold. They gave us a number that approaches $15.5 million. That includes not only the remediation of the units, the HVAC work that was done, the testing is costing. It includes furniture and relocation costs. It includes a cost for the hotels and a cost for the per diem that goes along with them living in those hotels. And then it also includes some storage cost. These are projected over a 26-week period. The county has identified some federal pass-through money that will actually allow the county to pay for the hotel rooms. And the hotel rooms are going to cost somewhere on the order of about $5.6 million of that $5.5 million that was put before us. The county has already moved on this particular aspect of the capital improvement costs. They are engaging families that are currently in hotels. They're trying to get them qualified for this program. It is done in a different way than what the Housing Authority has done it, has previously accomplished this task. But essentially, the county has identified this money and believes that it will be able to affect payment to the families or payment to the hoteliers for the housing of the families over the course of this period of time. So what it came back to on Friday, I think it was what would be the cost of remediation, restoration of the units that they've got, what would be the testing cost, and what would be the HVAC replacement cost associated with those units. And that was currently estimated to be $6.3 million. As I mentioned in our introduction before the mayor and Mr. Spears got dropped, was that because of cash flow issues, the Housing Authority has already tapped into all of its available funds for operational and capital costs. They are, as of today, going to be in a negative cash flow situation going forward. Upon discussion with the county manager on Friday, we determined that we would come back to our respective boards and ask that the county and the city both fund up to 1/2 of this $6.3 million. And while I know that our concern about splitting things 50-50 is generally an issue, I think the county's participation in this project, not only in the hotels, but also in some additional costs that they have already assumed with regard to furniture and storage and those types of things, that a 50-50 split, especially given the immediacy of this situation, is appropriate. What we're asking you to consider today is an appropriation from city funds on the order of $3.15 million that could be granted to the Housing Authority. It would be granted for them to cover capital costs, but you must understand that in the cash flow situation they are in, they may have to redirect that capital cost and then reimburse themselves from HUD funding for the capital costs that we would loan them. What I have asked of the Housing Authority Director, and I want to tell you, I feel so sorry for this gentleman because this is his 3rd week on the job, and he is thrown into the middle of this and is clearly learning as he goes. What I have talked to him about is the ability of this to be a loan, and he would have to find out from HUD whether or not HUD would reimburse them, reimburse us, and reimburse them, and then allow that to be used to reimburse us for the loan proceeds. Jeff Hovis with the Housing Commission is in the audience. I'm not sure Jeff really wants to have to discuss this, but I do want you to know he's here to be able to answer questions, as am I, and I'm going to stop at this point in time and let you start with your barrage of questions.
Right.
Well, I have one quick question, and that is, you're getting the new director to check on potential repayment of the loan. Are you saying that you want us, you're offering this up as an opportunity to help them, whether it is a loan or not?
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Okay, yes, Mr. Barnett.
I was very interested in hearing you say that the money that we would, if we allow them to borrow this money or give this money, is going to be used to get the houses fixed, the ones that, talk a little bit more about that, because we've got, did they say there were like about 50 or 70 houses ready to go, but we just don't have the resources to get them to fix it?
I'm afraid I'm going to have to pull Mr. Hovis into this conversation. I am not sure about the number of units. All I know is we're 151 families that were displaced. I don't know about the status of the existing units versus those that still have yet to have remediation done on them. Jeff?
So as it's coming forth, that would be a big lift if we could get those.
Yes, sir.
units
We
back
understand.
on
We
track.
understand that the housing authorities' cash flow problems come solely as a result of this remediation and how they're having to house these folks outside of the housing authority properties.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Mr. Hovis, thank you for being here, and thank you for stepping up and being willing to try to help solve this problem.
Yes, ma'am. Out of the answer to the question regarding the units, there are 151 units total that need some type of remediation and restoration. Out of that, we have 45 that have been either taken down to the studs or close to that are in some type of a process. Right now, 14 of those units are under construction with a contractor on site. There are 31 units that were taken down to the studs. We don't know if that was probably the best way to handle, but it was done prior to getting that stopped. So those units are ready to go. We have 105 units that we have worked together and sort of drilled back what the scope of work is. Originally, you may have saw where they were coming in at $40,000 to $80,000 a unit. And I have to admit, a few of us we questioned that. They have drilled down on these and got back into figuring out that the scope of work on these units should be under $25,000 per unit, and we're going at it at a sort of a different approach than some had thought. The new director, I was thankful the day he came. He has got into this head on. He's getting prepared to put out an RFP tomorrow that would actually put all these units out on the market for bid so that we could try to jump on these. Right now, the hotels are costing us $200,000 a week. The per diem is $100,000 a week. So, and then we have storage costs, another $4,000 a week. Going through these, originally you probably saw in some of the things they were forecasting this to go out a year. With the last two weeks of pretty intense work, we figured out that we can achieve 100% return to these units in 26 weeks. The new director is his mission is back before the end of the year on these. And we're hoping that the sooner we can get some of these units online, we can bring down the per diem and the hotel costs. With the help of the city and the county, we were able to get some apartments where we were able to move families into apartments would take away the per diem. You know, we're paying per diems to some families between $1,200 to $2,300 a week. And so if we can get them into other units, that will help that way too. They've just went through all the capital funds, all the operating funds to keep people in these units because there's no other choice in going on that. So I'm happy to answer questions.
We have questions? Mr. Waddell?
Mr. Hovis, first of all, I just want to say thank you for, I think it's important to note that this is a volunteer position, and he spent a tremendous amount of time digging into it and having some competent voices in the room trying to figure this out is what it's going to take, and I want to thank you for your service to the city on this. This was kind of something that I've been involved in since the moment I was elected. It's a tragedy, and it's a real emergency. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of the ideas and try and flush it out. But so there's 105 units that are not down to the studs that could be brought back online fairly quickly if there is some funding in place.
Yes, sir. What they've done is they've done as much as they could to prevent further damage, but they want to be able to jump on these. Now, they have these other units that we will approach, But we're going to have to be realistic and go after the ones that we can get done in a faster pace. It's numbers. We just have to figure out a way to make it so that more people we can impact get back in their units the fastest we're going to hit first.
And these 105 are the number that are like, they're not down to studs. The mold's been mitigated, and now we can turn them.
Right. And the problem, I think, is many of these units don't necessarily require a complete, and it's hard because a lot of people they think we have to take it down.
This is
And
an
that was,
emergency.
I think that was the mentality and the thought of the panic. But when you come back to see is that these units are being tested, they're finding what has to be done, and they're going in and doing that, and then they're being retested, and they'll be followed up, tested down the road to prevent any type of this happening again. I think the all or nothing toss that was thrown at us first isn't the appropriate approach.
I would agree. Okay, those are my initial questions. Thank you.
Other comments? Mr. Robin?
I know that when Ms. Moretti was up in the last item talking about the expunction program and how it may relate to COVID, certainly this relates to COVID, because during the shutdown, if you will, I know inspections almost came to a halt, which allowed some of this mold to manifest itself. So I can really see where this could be related to mold. Well, I'm sorry, to COVID. Is that a fair assumption? And I'm asking her, Jeff, or if you know the answer.
Based on the guidance the city and the county have given us, we have reached out to various programs that are out there, funds that came federal into the state of North Carolina for COVID relief, and we are going after those funds. But the availability of those funds and the delivery of those funds could be end of the year. So we're going at anything that's available on that, and so we have started that process.
And I have several questions or comments, but the other comment that begs to be asked is, I remember going across the street and meeting with the nice lady from HUD and having, Mr. Sharp was there, and I believe you were at that table, and it was a good, healthy debate, question and answers. And I guess what I'm befuddled by is, where is the federal government on this? I mean, have they just washed their hands and say it's up to y'all to fix it? And we're not even at this point willing to declare that this will be a loan. I mean, we're not in the business of bailing out the federal government. So, I mean, what are the contacts that you all have, Tony, anybody, with the federal government? Do they just kind of abandoned us?
They originally applied for an emergency grant through HUD. Went through the process. That grant was kicked back to them a number of times. Then it was determined the first go-round was that too much was focused on the fact it was related to hurricanes. And hurricanes that were a federally mandated situation, there is funding out there for that. So, of course, they have gone and applied for the North Carolina funds that are out there for Matthew and for Florence. So we are how far past and post those two incidents, and the first application for Matthew money will be in about 6 weeks. And then Florence money will be probably in about 2.5 months. I could be off my dates, but that's sort of what we've told. But they've been, those entities, we've been working with them ever since we started the other application. So part of what's going to, for where we're at, is that we've reapplied to HUD. Actually, they are sending another grant for emergency grant to HUD. So we're going after those funds again, and there's a second group. You'll have to correct me, in the Encore, there's funds that were released last week that maybe up to $3 million our entity could be able to apply for, which we're going to apply for. Then in addition, with some COVID money that's in the state legislature that's out there in the appropriations, we've reached out to them because, like I said, there were inspections that couldn't take place for almost 14 months, and it was due to COVID. So we're hoping that there'll be some relief there. In talking on, I'm a taxpayer, so I look at this fact, and if I was a private landowner and had apartments, I would be irritated in the process, thinking that it is bailout. But The situation is that we are going after different funds that they are looking to reimburse the city and the county for these loans. Like HUD's going to have to approve, like the things that come from HUD, we have to get their approval, but that's what Mr. Garrett's doing right now, is talking to them on how, if we get this emergency grant, that how those funds can go back to the city and the county to expedite and pay these projects off. So we're going after every source, and we're going to have to be accountable to bring that money back. I don't think that has ever not been the
I guess the reason some of these questions sound like we don't know what we're talking about is because the city of Wilmington has absolutely nothing to do with the Wilmington Housing Authority. The only connection we have is our mayor appoints the board, as you well know. That's it. The rest of us up here, I've never been to a housing authority meeting. I don't know all the stuff that's going on, but I do know that they fund the housing authority, and it's not money that you have to scurry around to try and find. There should be a regular source of revenue coming from up high to these things, and that's the part that's where I have a question. What happened?
well, the situation with the damage they had, and this is your question probably bigger than what I can probably answer. One, I wish we're going to invite you. We used to have meetings.
I don't need to, look, we got plenty on our plate.
But the situation got out of hand. Like I said, they have a situation where it impacts you have 500 people that are impacted by this. So I get that the money comes federally, but there are citizens of the city and the county.
Whoa, no.
Okay,
They're citizens of the county. They happen to live in the city, but they're citizens of the county, Jeff.
You know what, I'm not, my point is, I'm here to move forward and try to figure it out. So I appreciate the conversation. I'm just trying to answer questions that I can answer, so.
And it appears that we're going to, jump into this. If you've been here since this meeting started, and you've seen all the back and forth about what we're going to do with our tax rate and what we're not going to be able to do, what we can do, and then this comes at us. I mean, think about it from where we sit. This is a huge ticket.
No, I definitely agree.
Okay.
Jeff.
Yes, Mr. Spears.
Yes, sir.
Hey, man, how are you?
I'm good.
My question is, and maybe you've answered this already, what's the status of the initial ask of the $13 million from HUD, from the federal government?
Yeah, it was sent back and declined, so that's why we had to reapply.
Okay. I missed that part.
No, sir.
And you just said again that you're reapplying.
Yes, sir. It's happening this week, actually.
Okay. Could you tell us what the denial reason was?
One of the main ways it was kicked back was because the focus of damage due to Hurricane Florence is some of the property damage. They kicked it back as a federally mandated category catastrophe, so they kicked it back from that out of their funding pool.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Mr. Waddell?
Yeah, to, I guess, Councilman Spears and Councilman Rivenbark's points regarding ARPA funds, do we have those ARPA funds in our possession?
It's our interpretation that the ARPA funds are not eligible for this particular activity.
But do we have that? Those funds have been dispersed to us.
Half of the allocation that we will receive has been dispersed to us. The other allocation, rest of it should be coming in the next 30 days or so.
Whatever percentage split we do, I'd say to Councilman Rivenbark's point that it was COVID related. So let's use these federal funds towards that point.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Anderson and then Mr. Barnett.
Jeff, you're probably smart to stay there. This is not necessarily for you. I guess it's just driving me crazy because I've watched these ARPA funds, and we've tried to find every little, how can we hang a fingernail on something where we can say this is COVID? And here we got one where, you got inspectors, contractors, suppliers, all kinds of people where it is a COVID related, and we can't
This particular,
connect the dots. I guess it's just the way it was written.
this particular incidence of mold, at least according to the Housing Authority, has been related to Hurricane Florence. And leaks that have occurred over time and then manifested themselves as mold in the units. And we can't find a way to be able to make mold from Florence an ARPA issue.
I have a follow-up to that. What if we claim that it is COVID-related, we utilize those ARPA funds? I mean, what's the repercussions to the city if they say it's not ARPA funds and we're paying it out of the general fund anyway, right?
I am going to tell you that I ethically am bound to do what is legally correct.
Sure.
And I am not sure, Jennifer, will you come forward, please? I am not sure that, based upon the interpretation that we have gotten from our staff and them consulting with the School of Government as well as the HUD regulatory guidelines, that this is even by a stretch, an eligible ARPA-related expense. But Jennifer, you'll...
Yes, I agree with Tony, and the county and I have had those conversations and both agree that there's not a way to connect it to a COVID, as this all occurred before the COVID period even came in. So there's not a way. And, you know, just to remind council, we do have our ARPA plan funded, you know, an allocation for a recommendation on those funds. So if we were to, even if we could find a link, say, $3 million, we'd have to move things around and bring that back to council. And then if they come back and say it's not eligible, any of the items that we've put in there, if they come back and say it's not eligible, then we do have to pay it back with general fund, and then those are ARPA funds that could have been used for eligible expenses that we are not doing.
But the total 26 million wouldn't then be null and void as ARPA funds. It would just be the portion that was used improperly.
Ineligible, correct.
Okay.
And Mayor Pro Tem, if I can, it would come down to intention, and the liability from intentionally spending something in a way that we know that we shouldn't is monumental. And it's not just public liability, it's personal liability, both types.
Okay, Mr. Anderson.
Let me finish up if I could. And Jeff, you can just nod, that when you say they sent it elsewhere, is that FEMA money? Is that when you said that, you know, you had to reapply? Where's that coming from? Maybe you need to come up. Maybe you lost me too, but they kicked the application back.
It came back.
And then they said, you know, no, you got to get it out of this bucket. And it's the bucket from the two hurricanes. Is that state funds, federal funds, FEMA? What is that?
The grants it's a HUD emergency grant, and there's different ones for each fiscal
Storm.
year. And so the first one that was applied for was based with a focus based on the hurricane. And then they probably went through about 12 redirects where they sent back asking for additional information. And then the final decision was they had to kick it back, that it didn't qualify for their in HUD's category of why
Right.
it should be. But in those conversations, we had to reapply, and now going at it in a directive of how it was impacted through COVID and some of the situations. So everything that's getting sent back to them is to go after. There's about $26 to $28 million for the entire country for these emergency grants.
But go back to the hurricanes, just so I'm clear there. You mentioned, I thought I heard you mention we got Matthew in I can't remember, 6 weeks, and then we got Florence in 3 months or something. So what is that?
Right, that was, and I'm the best of my knowledge on this, is what we've gone. That is money that was from the federal government was sent to the state to manage, to release out densities that suffered damage due to those
So
times.
it's state, right now it's in the state's hands.
Right, so we're going to apply for those. And in this situation, it sort of doesn't kick into one box. There was hurricane issues that caused prolonged moisture, that then we had mold and situations, lack of inspections, that things weren't caught. There was some renovations that were done at different sites where they went in and retrofitted HVAC systems into homes. That Houston Moore is an example. They retrofitted systems that used to be window systems. They went in and put central in those. There was some situations where some mold was caused from that.
Over air conditioning.
Over air conditioning, exactly, because the use of that system. So there's like all these different areas, and just from a common man's point, we keep saying, well, they want it to be all hurricane, they want it to be all COVID, they want it to be all, some other type of housing issue, but it's combined. So through the process, and due to the fact that the entity didn't really have a person that's skilled in the HUD language, and it's a difficult organization. They have many regulations, and so
it's fair to say we're caught in the bureaucracy of different buckets of money that are for very specific things, but at the end of the day, we have folks living in hotels, and you're out of money.
Yeah, there's a lot of, we want to help, there's this money, apply, and then when you apply, you're like, well, you need to apply this way. So, I mean, and we're honing in on that, and we have to take accountability. It's our entity, we have to figure it out.
Thank you. Tony, you mentioned, I can't remember the adjective or verb you used, but it was like you feel like 50-50 is a fair split. They came to a 60-40 on the last thing we just discussed a minute ago. It looks like at the end of the day, we got a choice here. Do we want to help or not? And so if we're going to help, what's fair to the city taxpayer? And I'm not trying to be cold or calculate. It's just how do you split it? So, 50, I don't remember the numbers we've come up with over the years. We've kind of settled on 40 as something that's about more than fair. And, if you look at the city taxpayer, we did some calculations years ago that was in the low 30s is really a fair split for the city taxpayer. I'm just curious why you felt like 50 is a good on this one. I mean, I know that you're going to say, look, it's what they came to us with. I'm just curious.
I'm going to tell you again, they're already allocating money for the hotels. Although it is pass-through money, it is nonetheless county funds. Secondly, they have already allocated money to furniture and storage facilities for these particular units. All of that given without doing pencil to paper. Yes, sir, I felt like 50-50 was an appropriate split.
So the county's paid for that list that on their own that you
Yes,
just
sir.
talked about?
Yes, sir.
But you don't have a ballpark number on any of that?
I do not have that with me, no. I can get it.
And the hotels that is a pass-through, that's federal money, right?
That is my understanding, yes. It could be used for other purposes within the county.
Yeah.
So it's not just for HUD, it's not just for the housing?
It's for homelessness,
Wow,
as I recall.
okay.
You have something there, Joe?
I do. What has been relayed is through the ERAP program is the hotel side will be about $5.6 million. That's when I handle that part of it. And to break it down, the total 15.4, we come out with the construction being the 6.3, the capital improvement side. And then we have the family per diems and that come out to about 2.6 million. And like I said, the hotels are 5.6. We have storage that is right around $270,000, and tying those together. So the county has already helped out is working on the hotel side. There's been work on the furniture and some of the supplies for relocation, and I think that's to where Tony's in. Those are the numbers I have from up to date.
Okay. Tony, is this, I mean, I know we're all hopeful that we can get paid back. Some, all, when, I don't know. Where would these funds come from? Fund balance?
Yes, sir, they'd have to come from fund balance. The one particular, if council is so inclined to go along with this program, I would ask that council provide us direction on whether they want us to come straight from the unrestricted fund balance or whether you want to use a portion of that $1.5 million that's set aside in next year's budget for this particular purpose. It was designed for gap financing, but the question would be, is this a more important or pressing need than reservation of it for a forthcoming set of units?
Mark, what is the total that we're being asked?
3.1 million.
So the 1.5 would just be a portion of that, and the balance would have to come out of undesignated fund
Yes,
balance?
sir. Yes, sir.
Jeff, I know in conversations that we've had over at the convention center and across the street, was the market that we're in, the contractors are busy. I saw a bid opening this morning, and the low bid was this, and the next 3 bids were way down here, and they just figured if they got the job, they were going to get paid well for it. They're busy. Do you think that this is something that, I know that you said the new director has got an RFP prepared to go out tomorrow. Do you feel good about it?
I do. When they reappointed a couple of us to the board, the first thing we were told is how they couldn't get contractors. So what we did is we went out and started going and just knocking on doors, talking to people. We found them. I mean, they're out there. They're willing to step in. And so we feel good about that. So when I came back and said, well, we have contractors, it's like, we don't have money. So then that went to that kind of situation. So
Kind of need both.
Now they're like, can you go find some money? So then that's where we're at.
One other question, this total is this something you think will carry the day and get it through to where everybody's back to, or will there be another visit and more money?
The goal is not to have that. I mean, part of the reason is to go in, and if we don't have to expend some of this money, then it's sooner the money can come back. The Housing Authority entity, one of the questions that came out is like, can this entity run? Say this didn't happen and everything was fixed. Can they operate? And they can. That's the thing. It's an entity that provides a service, and public housing side of it's not supposed to make money. It's actually supposed to lose money, but then parts of our other programs go into different directions. So the entity itself has the ability sustain, and it does benefit a number of different people. This entity impacts probably about 18,000 people who live in our county and city, because you have the residents, you have the landlords, you have the different family members dynamic. So it has, and it also, we have some redevelopment that this entity will be doing that. Well, one of the larger areas in the Midtown will be redeveloped, and that to lose that ability by losing this entity would be hard. So that's why we looked at it as, should we not, should we make a recommendation?
We don't have a lot of choice. It's got to be done.
Yeah, it's hard. Like I said, it's one that we look at.
Mr. Rivenbark, as I mentioned at the top of my presentation, we specifically asked for them to give us capital needs so that if the capital needs got met, then we could justify that that's a program of the city, that's something the city does. That if it comes into operating cash or operating money, then we do not do that. And most importantly, it also gave us a number around which we could coalesce and say, this is the maximum amount of money that you asked for, and this is what we're giving you. If they come back with a second ask, the only way the staff would entertain that was if the capital cost wound up being more than what they originally anticipated.
Tony, in just a little history here, what has been our relationship with Wilmington Housing Authority over the past 30 years?
Mr. Rivenbark, you hit the nail directly on the head. We appoint the commission members, and they then run the entity. We have not participated financially. We do not anticipate taking over administration. It is something that we simply appoint the commission, and that's it. And we have not participated financially at this point in time. And I honestly have been an opponent of participating financially, but I don't see any other way around this given the fact that they've got cash flow issues right now.
Understood.
Barnett?
Thank you. Jeff, first of all, thank you, like everyone else has said, for all of your work. And Neil hit it on the head. He said, either we're going to help or not help. And we have to help. That's just the facts. But then I want to ask you a question. The new guy, is he is he working out well, you know? How is that going?
Yeah, I mean, he's jumped right into it. Like, if, I have to admit, if I had been given the information coming into the town when the information he received, I'd have turned around. But I mean, he jumped in, he came in, got right into it. He is so well versed in all of the things we need that he's jumping on that. And today, he was able to convince the CFO to come in who has worked for large entities. That is what we need because they can jump on the financial side. And he's put together a plan that is sustainable. He's putting his reputation on this. I mean, when we told him, you know, we needed to really know where we had to go, and from going to not, like I said, I came on, there was no one there, not having someone, so someone is great, but he brings us some skills that we definitely need, and a long-term situation, I believe.
Okay, and then I guess my last question would be, you know, when you say there's 105 houses that we could fix under $25,000, has that information been shared with private entities? You know, are there, you know, private companies or individuals that might say, okay, you know, I'll give $25,000 to fix a house? Has that?
As far as contractors, sir?
No, I'm saying private organizations that may want to say, okay, I could give this amount of money to replace this house.
As charitable contribution.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, there has been we have reached out. There's a number of different entities that have been going through the New Hanover Disaster Coalition. They have put together a whole program. So where there's donations, a certain religious organization donated $30,000 towards the resident side. Most of the funds coming in are coming in to assist the citizens and the residents that are impacted, less for any type of capital housing authority property. Now, we have had people reach out about coming in to do work that may be able to do it, say, pro bono, is that the right way of coming in, licensed people that can help us with that. And we're going to go through that process too, because if we can reduce the amount that we get from the county and the city on this, then we can expedite getting it back to them, because this is something that has to be carried forward on their books, and then it goes through the whole process. And just having this type of situation going through audits is just not something an entity wants to have. They want to be self-supporting.
And my last point is, I volunteer at DC Virgo every morning. I'm one of those guys that opens the car for the kids, and I know a couple of those families that live in the hotels. And the one family I'm thinking about right now, I asked her how is it going today, and she says we're struggling. You know, she has a family of probably 4 or 5 kids, and they're stuck in a small room, and it's really challenging. And so definitely, we got to help.
Yes, sir. We appreciate it.
Put that human perspective to it. But thank you guys for your work.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Anderson?
Tony, I guess we're back to the original conversation. So you were talking about how to pay for it. So, just scenarios. If you stuck with the recommended budget, you've got, help me, $2.5 million over the 30% to play with, and that
Yes, sir.
leaves us $1 million short.
Yes, sir.
Would you just go under the 30% temporarily?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Waddell?
Once again, this is something I've been involved in since I've been elected. It's probably the one issue that I've initially, right after being elected, I was putting private business owners together, trying to fill some gaps in housing. I'm not sure whether that ever came to fruition. I was in D.C. with Councilmember Barnett and Sappho, begging our legislators to assist, and hopefully that will, since it is a federal program, come to fruition in the not too distant future. But realizing that it's not a function of the city, it nonetheless is an emergency. We've got kids that are about to be homeless, and there's really no other way to go about it. And so if we can stop the bleeding by funding some of these capital improvements to get 105 units back online in a quick manner. And I'm confident that with the, you kind of running this project the way you have so far, again, I appreciate it, and the city owes you an honor. So I think now the real issue is how we fund it, and if we go into that $2 million fund balance and then maybe dip into the affordable housing allocation that we've had, the money is there. It's just figuring out the dollars and cents, right?
Yes, I agree with that. Did you have something else, Mr. Burnett?
Follow-up question. Do we know if there's any insurance on these units?
They are insured for property casualty, but insurance claims is denied for mold. There was up to $15,000 worth of mold coverage provided in the policy, and that was, of course, released easily by the insurance company, and they washed their hands from that point.
Okay, I'm done. I'm good. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I agree. Jeff, again, thank you for trying to help us solve this. I think we obviously we have to step up, whether it's our role or not. We have our citizens, are in dire straits, and so by no fault of our own, we're going to have to try to help solve this problem. If it is a loan, I think people up here would think, the chances of our really getting paid back might be, a struggle. But I would like to see the city of Wilmington paid back first, prior to the county being paid back, because this is, the county's responsible, again, for social services and for the health department, and it's a lot of what they get. 85% of their budget is pass-through money from the feds and from the state. And since the Wilmington Housing Authority, and I think for the public this is never completely clear, is a federal program. And just to piggyback on what Mr. Rivenbark talked about, it's only named the Wilmington Housing Authority because that through statute is, I believe it has to be named after the municipality in which it operates. But it really is much more, it's totally a federal program. So your federal tax that you've just paid recently should be paying for this. But as everyone said, we do have an emergency here. So I hope we step up. I think we ought to do it. And I think it's a good idea to take the money, even if we can down the road replace it in some way. We could replace some of that money with some other funding. But that's, if you've got 2 or 3 kids and one of them struggling, you've got to take your resources and help that person or that entity that's struggling at that moment, and try to then even things out later and try to get back on an even keel. So I would like to see us do it, and I think the staff can come up with the idea of, obviously you have some good ideas about how to really fund it.
Margaret, that was a great point about the city getting paid back first. Is that something you think the county would take any issue with?
I have not had that discussion with the county manager. We can do that.
That's a great point.
And I will just caution council, to the extent that there's any federal money in it, the federal requirements are always that they would be paid back first. And I don't know if there will be any federal money in any of the use of these funds, but they will have their hand in first in front of us.
Well, they ought to be paying for it.
I couldn't agree more, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
This is not our responsibility. We're doing this because we're responsible local leaders, and we have a crisis here. But the federal government should be paying 100% of this bill, not the local entities, not the county, and certainly not the city. We're the third entity that ought to even be involved in this. So we certainly, if we take the citizens, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers. So if we do something that we really have no mandatory reason to participate in this, we ought to be getting our money back before anybody else does. That's just me.
But
yes, Mr.
I think we
Rivenbark.
need to enter into this agreement if we're so inclined to do with the idea that we will not be paid back.
Sadly
I mean,
true.
that's how that should affect your vote or your nod of the head in either direction. We're not going to get paid this money back.
So, Mr. Manager, what are you looking for here? Consensus or vote or
We,
what?
I think I hear consensus among those folks who have spoken. I think we will bring you back an ordinance. We'll walk it on tomorrow night.
Okay.
With your permission to waive your rules and bring it on as the last item. And then we will bring it with $2 million, well, we'll actually bring it with $3.1 million coming out of fund balance. We will probably have to alter, and I am just thinking off the top of my head, which worries these folks in the audience all the time, but I think we would have to alter the manager's recommended budget to reduce the $1.5 million allocation reservation for affordable housing down to $400,000.
Okay, well, so you will
We will
update us on that.
We will bring forward the budget, or the recommended budget as amended, and then we'll bring on the allocation of money at the close of the meeting.
Okay, and so tomorrow is just the first reading of the budget
Yes, ma'am.
anyway, so we in 2 weeks, we have the second reading, so if something needs to be changed, we can.
Yes, ma'am, but
We'll have
it's
another
important, it's
opportunity.
important we get the allocation to the WHA as soon as possible, and so we will add it as an ordinance tomorrow night.
All right, are there any other comments or concerns? It seems to me we're good to go.
Jeff, I know what you do for a living, and you're taking a lot of valuable time away from it. Thank you.
No, it's worth it. Thank you, sir.
Well, you said it.
I also want to say thanks to the entire board at WHA. They've especially in the last couple of months, last month or two, have really taken the bull by the horns. And I'd also recommend or bring to the board's attention that our internal auditor, as well as the county's internal auditor, have gone over the books and tried to verify as best we can the amount of money that's been requested, and to the point that we can verify what the ask is. So.
Okay, great. I think
Thank
we're
you.
good to go. Again, thank you, Jeff. We really appreciate it. And to the new board that's willing to step up and deal with all of this, our hats off, and we really thank each and every one of you. Mr. Manager, do we have anything else? I know
Madam
we
Mayor
have
Pro
at least
Tem, I
one
think
thing.
that's enough for one morning. We do have a closed session that the city attorney has asked to be held downstairs in the city manager's conference
Okay,
room.
I will read this and then entertain a motion. Is there a motion to enter into a closed session pursuant to the provisions of GS 143-318.11A3, A5, and A6 in order for City Council to, number one, consult with and provide instruction to the city attorney regarding potential legal claims, including the case of Schroeder versus City of Wilmington, file 19-CVS-4028, and number two, the Funk Yard LLC versus City of Wilmington, file number 21-CVS-2790. Secondly, consult with the city attorney regarding a proposed workers' compensation settlement in the amount of Jack Jarvis, in the matter of Jack Jarvis versus City of Wilmington, IC number 22-005108. And thirdly, to instruct the staff regarding the city's negotiation position concerning the possible acquisition of real property. And number four, consider the qualification, competence, fitness, performance, and conditions of employment of public officers or employees. And I will say that before I entertain the motion, that this closed session will be held downstairs in the city manager's conference room, and at the end of the closed session, council will reopen its public session and adjourn from that location without returning to this council chamber. And with that, I'd ask for a motion.
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Barnett made a motion, and Mr. Rivenbark seconded that. We will stand adjourned into closed session.
And I'm afraid it takes a roll call vote, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, let me find that. Okay, we need a roll call vote. Mayor Saffo? We have a motion on the floor to move into closed session. Mr. Spears?
Aye. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I'm just
Okay.
trying to figure out what
And
I'm
Ma-
doing here.
and Margaret, I have an eye here too.
Oh, okay, great. All right. Mr. Rivenbark? Yes. Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Barnett? Mr. Waddell? And the chair is aye also. At this point, we will move to closed session.